What's the most important question to ask a sick person? Jesus shows us in John chapter 5. So this week, pre-read John chapter 5. I'll go through a little bit of it in just a minute. You know, when I was in college, I worked at a summer camp. On Sundays, we would have the huge flood of new campers come in, and we're trying to pump them up, get them excited about the week. We go to the gym, play dodgeball. I was acting crazy. I was running, and I jumped and ran up the gym wall and grabbed onto the framework for the basketball goal, and I'm swinging from side to side, and I let go. My momentum carried me sideways, and I fell from like 7, 8, 9 feet sideways and landed on this elbow. I felt this shooting pain in my elbow, and I was like, ooh, that is not good. That feels terrible. But what I really wanted was to connect with these campers. I didn't want to take care of this. I wanted to go take them to dinner. I wanted to get them in bed, do this cabin time with them, do some teaching. So I didn't want to deal with this. But the shooting, throbbing pain, eventually it's like midnight. All the campers are in bed. I'm laying awake. I'm like, man, this hurts really bad. And so Sunday night when the campers came, I did not want to deal with this. But by Monday morning, if you had asked me the same question Jesus asks, here's the question. Do you want to be healed? I would have said, yes. And so I went to the office. I said, guys, I think I broke my arm. They're like, what? Like this morning? No, last night. But now I'm desperate. And so sure enough, I went to the emergency room or I don't know, doctor's office, got it x-rayed. I'd broken my elbow. I had to carry this thing in a sling for half the summer. So in John chapter 5, Jesus encounters a man who is sick. It's a pretty famous moment, and I can't go through all of it, but I just want you to think about some of these questions as you pre-read John chapter 5, and then we'll talk about it at Youth Wednesday night. So at the very beginning of John chapter 5, he shows up in this place in Jerusalem, right? He shows up at this place where there's a pool, and gathered around this pool in the temple area are a multitude of sick people. You can read it in verse 2. Now there in Jerusalem by the sheep gate, a pool in Aramaic called Bethesda, which has 5 roofed colonnades. So this is a beautiful mental picture that I've got. These 5 roofed colonnades, this pool, this area. And then you go to verse 3. In these lay a multitude of invalids, blind, lame, paralyzed. So just picture for a second, what would it look like nowadays? What's being described is like the hospital where a multitude of people lay sick. But they're not at a hospital. They may or may not be getting well. They're just kind of there and they're sick. I don't really know if this is a place that, if we were picking which gate to go in and out of, I think there's a lot of people that probably avoided this gate because it's just filled with people who are dying or they're terminally ill or they just are invalids of every single kind. So just picture this. This is the gate that Jesus goes to. Verse 5. One man was there who'd been an invalid for 38 years. 38 years. That had become his whole life. His whole identity was this particular sickness. In verse 6, when Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he'd already been there a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be healed?" So, I'm curious, what do you think about that question? Why would Jesus ask an obviously sick man, "Do you want to be healed?" 38 years, "Do you want to be healed?" Why would Jesus ask him that question? Look ahead to verse 6. Look ahead to the next verses. This man gives Jesus an answer. What kind of answer does he give to Jesus? You can read that for yourself. And then Jesus does eventually heal the man. It's pretty famous healing, but then it goes into this whole section about it happening on the Sabbath. So it creates some conflict. What kind of conflict does Jesus create by healing on the Sabbath? And so what about you? If Jesus questioned you about your life and said, "Do you want to be healed?" Like, what would you say? Do you feel desperate for divine healing? Or you're like, I'm pretty much good as long as people would kind of work out their own stuff, I'm all right. Like, how would you answer Jesus if he questioned you about your life? Would you argue about his authority? Like, is he allowed to do things on whatever day he wants and when he wants? And like, would you have some conflict with Jesus about his authority? The whole rest of the chapter is dealing with Jesus and his authority. So read it carefully and just kind of ask yourself the question, what is Jesus trying to do? Ask the Holy Spirit to give you some insight into your own need. Where do you need healing? And do you want to be healed?